Mixed martial arts. Mixed martial arts. How do we like our martial arts? We like them short notice! Woo!
Well played, our producer extraordinaire, E. Casey lied. And yes, that is the type of energy that we wanted to hear, that we want to see, because UFC 294 going down tomorrow. As a matter of fact, 24 hours from right now, we're going to be on the final couple of prelims heading into the main card. Hashtag early day MMA. And as you can see in the poster, a couple of fascinating bouts that came together on less than 2 weeks' notice. We get the rematch of the fight of the year so far, Islam Makhachev versus Alexander Volkanovski 2. And we got Khamzat Chimaev returning to the octagon to face the former welterweight champion Kamaru Usman. What a world we live in, everybody. Welcome to the UFC 294 preview show. I am Mike Heck, being joined by two of my favorites. First, my bald brethren, the wise wordsmith himself. He is Mr. Shaheen Al-Shatti. Shaheen, go D-backs. How are you?
Go D-backs. Casey, my man, that was tremendous. This man is like a wonderful box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get with him. I love it every time. Mike, we're going to be watching fights right now at this exact moment, 24 hours from now. Hell yeah, morning MMA.
We love that. And also joining us, the Prince of Positivity, the co-host of On to the Next One, and more importantly than that, is my best friend and yours, Mr. Alexander K. Lee, AK. I was gonna say, how tired are you on a scale of 1 to 10 after waking up super early?
Waking up from a slumber, but a lovely slumber, because I went to bed thinking of weigh-ins, because we did the weigh-in show at 1 a.m. Eastern time. It was eventful. We had the box of redemption out there. We had a couple of misses. We had one really big miss, but fortunately, no big misses at the top of the card, and we've got all the big fights lined up. So I am excited, man. I might not sleep for another 24 hours, and I don't care. I'm gassed up.
Is it the box of redemption or the box of shame, or is it the box
Today,
of intrigue? I feel like
it was all over the place. And if you ask Casey, he also called it the box of magic, because Tim Elliott was throwing some aspersions at Muhammad Makhachev, saying that he did not believe he did not believe he made 126 pounds. So Casey said maybe it's now the box of magic, and it magically made Makhachev make weight somehow. So I don't know.
Remember when Khabib stepped on the scale for the Justin Gaethje fight, and he literally had like 1 foot on, and they slammed the thing home? 155. Yep. And that was just the theme of that entire weigh-in, is that if you stepped on the scale and you were within like 3 pounds, they slammed it home and was like, "Yep, you're in." They went digital scale for this one, AK?
No. They had the normal scale today, and they were mostly using the Vegas method of close enough, slam it home. So I'm surprised I was surprised that Dudakova missed. I was surprised Dudakova was one of the fighters who missed. I'm surprised they didn't just
0.6.
I know. I don't know why they didn't just let it slide.
It was crazy. Early too. It was early. Like, she still had a bit of time to get that off. Didn't happen.
Hey, you don't need to when you're making 12 and 12. As long as you get that win bonus, you're good to go, baby.
Go, right?
You go home with a couple extra bucks. Shaheen, I want to ask you about this, because we have done numerous programs. We've done BTL. We had some pre-fight Q&A talk about this. We talked about it again on BTL yesterday. Heck of a mornings, all of that. Roundtables. We have not heard from you about this, Shaheen, since all the changes took place, because we were supposed to get Islam Makhachev versus Charles Oliveira 2, the rematch from literally this exact card last year. Instead, Volk steps in to replace Oliveira. We were supposed to get Khamzat Chimaev versus Paulo Costa, a rivalry that has just been looking to explode for like 2 years now. The storyline was there. Khamzat going up to 185, taking on a legit former title challenger, 185-pounder, and Paulo Costa. They didn't like each other. There's a lot there. We lose Oliveira, we get Volk. We lose Costa, we get Usman. Do you like this better? Is this better in your eyes? Is it worse? Is it exactly the same? Where are you at with this?
It's not better. I would say that right off the bat, right? It's not better. If the card that we had, the initial iteration of it, 9.9 out of 10, I say it's like an 8.5 maybe. You could sell me an 8.5, and I would buy that up. That being said, it's very good still, right? Like, if this is the UFC working overtime, working to fix something short notice, like, this is about as good as you could possibly ask them to do. That being said, I mean, I would still prefer the initial card because I think we were getting a lot of answers to some questions that I would still like to get answers to, in particular with the co-main, right? Like we have talked for like 3 years about Khamzat Chimaev sort of making this run, especially now at middleweight. We've been mulling over this for about a year. Is he a real middleweight? Can he face up against the big time middleweights of the 185-pound division? And so, of course, we end up with him fighting a welterweight for a potential middleweight title shot because that is how MMA works. So that respect sucks. I do like the Usman matchup as a whole, just by itself. Like that's a good matchup. If you throw that to me, that at any point in time, I'm happy with it. But I would like the middleweight question answered, and I don't think we're going to get it. That being said, there is some like cool side roads that open to it, right? Usman Strickland 2 randomly being up for grabs for a 185-pound belt is just the most bizarre thing ever that's now on the table. Also, Khamzat Chimaev, like whatever, regardless of whatever you say, Kamaru Usman is one of the best fighters in the world still. So like that's still a really tough test for Khamzat. And in the main event, I mean, obviously, I really wanted to see the Islam Makhachev Charles Oliveira rematch. I didn't want to see this fight run back so quickly, but if there is an opportunity to, if you are going to run it back in this type of situation makes more sense to me than if this was planned in this way, just because it has been so short since we last saw this. But that being said, I mean, I don't know. Like I've seen a lot of chatter this week about, oh, Alexander Volkanovski has nothing to lose. Like this is just, perfect for Alex because he has absolutely nothing to lose. And that seems crazy to me. That seems really off to me because I immensely respect what Alexander Volkanovski is trying to do here. And I think if he's going to get this opportunity, like this is maybe the best chance for him just because Islam was very much not preparing for anyone remotely like him. So you're sort of catching Islam off guard too. You may be evening the stakes in that respect, especially if Alexander is to be believed that he was training beforehand for this and had an inkling that something might happen. And so it was just doing it just in case. But Alexander Volkanovski has a lot to lose, man. He has a lot to lose. He is wagering a lot here. That man is 35 years old. And if he goes 0-2 against the lightweight champion, that sort of cements whatever that aspect of his legacy will be, right? Like, I don't know that we expect Islam to lose anytime soon, but even if he does, Alexander Volkanovski is still 0-2 now at that point, at this champ run that he's trying to make. And he's getting up there in age. We always say it with the smaller guys. When you start hitting the mid to late 30s, stuff goes quick, stuff goes overnight, and things happen that you don't expect from challengers that you just don't expect because you just lose in that half a second. If Alexander Volkanovski can't succeed in this second attempt to be champ, it's just not in the cards for him. And, that's okay. Like, that's not the end of the world. A lot of fighters now never ended up being a 2-division champion. Max Holloway, Jose Aldo, all the greatest featherweights outside of Conor McGregor never did it. But that being said, I mean, I've said that being said a couple times, but that's just the thing with this card, right? There's a lot of concessions that are being made all across the board from the main event to the co-main event. The fights are great still themselves, but there is a lot on the line now for a couple different guys now in a way that is very unique and interesting that wasn't there 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, I'm with you. To me, this isn't better, but it's not worse. And that alone makes this a massive win for the UFC because normally when we get these late shifts, it's drastically worse. Very few times is it better. And it's rare that it's even the same. So this is a huge win for the UFC. And to put these two fights together on 12 days notice, kudos to everybody involved. That includes Chimaev and Islam, who are already scheduled to compete on the card anyways. AK, I want to go back to what Shaheen just said, because we're going to dive into the main event. We're going to do gymnastics scale, all that stuff, but we're going to wait on that because Shaheen said something very interesting. He said that Alexander Volkanovski has a lot to lose tomorrow. Taking the fight on 12 days notice, the cojones, all the talk, all the praise he's getting, certainly deserved, but I think Makhachev deserves the same praise, if not more, for changing everything here, and he gets this opportunity. Even Makhachev is saying, this dude's just fighting for a paycheck. He's got no winning streak to lose anymore because I already beat him. He's got no title on the line. He's just going to make a whole bag of money, and then he's going to go back to 45 and defend his title. Do you agree with Shaheen? Do you feel like Volk has a lot to lose here?
Yeah, I've been arguing that probably since when this fight was announced because there's one or two people, maybe one specific person on the MMA fighting crew who is not down with the Alexander Volkanovski has the biggest cojones in the sport and he's putting so much on the line. He's been through enough. I don't need to name him. His first name has 3 letters. That's all you need to know. And if you've listened to any MMA fighting programming recently, you've seen this man very upset with the narratives that are forming around Volkanovski jumping on this short notice opportunity. Somewhat understandably so. in some aspects, and other aspects not so much. But there is a lot to lose here. He's not getting a third shot. He's not getting a third shot if he loses to Islam Makhachev, and this means a lot to him. He is, since he lost that first fight, he has said he wants another shot. It means a lot to him. Yes, to become a 2-division champion. Yes, to win the lightweight title. So I think if that opportunity came along later, he'd still be happy to jump on it. But he really, really specifically wants to prove that he's better than Islam Makhachev. It's kind of a weird thing because Islam himself hasn't had that dominant run at lightweight yet. So it's a little bit strange. Like, why is Volkanovski so hung up on beating this specific guy? I think there's a little bit of Khabib proxy in there. Not to say that Volkanovski, would feel like, oh, I'd beat Khabib if I beat Islam. But I think in the minds of a lot of people, Islam carried on that sort of, that Nurmagomedov lineage and has already kind of been deemed an invincible champion, or at least, after he beat Charles the first time, people were like, wow, no one's going to take the title from this guy for a long time. And then Volkanovski comes along, almost does it. And now that has become not his sole focus. He looked great against Yair Rodriguez. I think he was really looking forward to that proposed Ilia Topuria fight we're supposed to get in January. But it's always been on the back of his mind. He kept mentioning in interviews. It kept getting asked to him. He kept saying, if that fight ever comes up, I want it. And now he's taking it. So I do think he has plenty to lose. It might, and who knows what condition he'll come out of this fight. He escaped the first fight pretty healthy, I think we can say. It's safe to say, but who knows this time around, taking it on short notice. Again, another tough fight with the other best fighter in the world. He might miss out not just on January. He says he wants to take the Topuria fight, which seems unlikely in my mind. He might miss out on February, March. Who knows? Maybe we don't see. Maybe we don't see him again until next summer. It's really hard to say. So there's always risk in that aspect. He is also, I feel, risking his pound for pound spot. This is something I definitely want to mention. On MMA Fighting's pound for pound rankings, we have Volkanovski number 1. We kept him there after the Makhachev loss because I think, as most people would agree, he's the guy coming up. How much can he lose if he's the one? Even the first time around is a risky fight, but he had far more to gain than he did to lose, right? Because he's the featherweight champion coming up to fight the lightweight champion. So we kept him there. It's not unanimous, but he is slightly ahead and number 1. In the UFC rankings, he's also ahead of Makhachev. He's number 2, I think, and Makhachev is number 3. So there is something to be lost here. I'm sure there's a lot of people who still say, well, why does it matter if he loses to the lightweight champion? That still shouldn't affect his pound for pound ranking. I think at some point it has to. I think, speaking for myself, I was willing to do if he loses, it doesn't really matter, especially if he puts on a competitive fight, which he did. I was willing to do that. If he loses again, there has to be some sort of consequence in the pound for pound rankings, I feel. And I will say it now, even if it's another competitive fight, if he comes out in the wrong decision, if he loses, I will be bumping him down. I don't remember exactly how I have them ranked now, but I'm pretty sure I still have Volk number 1. I think he will lose that spot. And I think the UFC will also move Makhachev up, possibly past John Jones, until John Jones fights Stipe, of course. So that mattered, and that matters to both guys. That pound for pound ranking, they care about that a lot.
Yeah, I bumped Makhachev to 1 after the win, but it was more like 1A, 1B for me. But Makhachev was 1A because he won. But then Volk just pitched a perfect game against Yair Rodriguez. A lot of people thought Yair was going to be one of his tougher tests at 145, and he just iced him, destroyed him. So 1B became 1A, 1A became 1B, and so forth and so on. So, Shaheen, you talk about what's at stake for Alexander Volkanovski, and he's talked a lot about legacy and what this fight means and all of that. And it doesn't seem like he's using the 12 days notice as something to like boost up the fight and boost himself up, but it doesn't seem like he's going to use that as an excuse. So I'm not either. So however this plays out tomorrow, I'm not going to say, well, if he didn't have it on 12 days notice, I'm not going to feel any differently about it, because he said, yes, he smiled when he got the phone call. So that's Volkanovski's side. Now we have Islam Makhachev, Shaheen. This dude has been clawing his way, trying to get big fights to get a title fight. Luckily, the lightweight division, in its weirdness, set it all up so that Islam Makhachev could fight Charles Oliveira for the lightweight title, which was vacant at the time because Oliveira beat Justin Gaethje but missed weight the day before. Happened to be in Abu Dhabi, so the timing is absolutely perfect. Wins the fight. Defends against Volkanovski after a tremendous Khabib tag team call-out of the featherweight champion on that very event. Wins the fight, and now he's back fighting the man again. What's at stake for Islam Makhachev here, Shaheen Al-Shatti? How catastrophic is it for him if he loses this fight? Or do you feel like, well, 12 days notice, 1-1, maybe it's not as bad? What do you think? What's at stake here for Islam outside of the title?
I just love the breakdown you just did. How weird has this lightweight division been for the last half decade at this point? Not even half decade. So like Conor McGregor wins the belt in 2016, which was objectively just a weird thing, right? Because it coincided with his whole rise and 2 division champ and just everything to do with it. And then he just abandons the belt for a year. We get Tony Ferguson in there, interim champ, hurts himself on a cord. The Khabib matchup just can't get in. Khabib finally takes the belt, and then we get multiple interim champions over the course of Khabib's run, right? We get Dustin Poirier in there. We get Justin Gaethje, all these different interim champs. Charles Oliveira that finally comes, gets some stability finally in his division, and then he loses his belt on the scale. And now we have Islam Makhachev, and his long-awaited title reign starts with 2 defenses against the featherweight champion. The UFC lightweight championship record for title defenses, consecutive title defenses, is 3. Islam Makhachev is going to be 2/3 of the way there with just fighting featherweights if he wins on Saturday. This whole division just makes absolutely no sense. It hasn't for a while now, and this is just very fitting for what 155 is. Especially it's the deepest division. It's the most fun division. There's just so many contenders, and none of them ever get their shots. So we always just end up doing weird stuff because that's just how it goes. That being said, I mean, I got to stop saying that being said. I don't know why I've said that so many times today. Let's check me on that next time I do that. Islam Makhachev is still putting a lot on the line here, right? Like he fought this man once already. Alexander Volkanovski is objectively one of the best fighters in the world, and he was extremely competitive with Islam Makhachev in that first matchup. I had it 4-1. A lot of people had it 3-2. Either way, it was still close. And Alexander Volkanovski, if you care about the optics, right, he ends that fight just optically very much winning in that 5th round, sort of controlling everything as the bell sounds in that 5th round and looking like he was taking momentum. So this is a very dangerous fight for Islam Makhachev, especially because you consider like who he was preparing for, right? You're preparing for Charles Oliveira, this incredibly tall, long, lanky sort of jiu-jitsu player who has like a very awkward striking game, but is very powerful on the feet, but will also try to pull these Fabricio Verdum style, like over-exaggerated guard pulls and things like this when you nail him. And then you switch all the way to Alexander Volkanovski, who's just a polar opposite in every respect. He's shorter, he's quicker, he's maybe not as powerful, but he's a lot more technical, and he's not going to be doing that kind of stuff, and he's not really hunting you on the ground either. It's just such a stylistically different matchup than Islam was angling for and preparing for this whole time. It's tough, man. I mean, you can say anything you want about the weight classes. You can say anything you want about the size. In that first fight, Alexander Volkanovski definitely looked like the fighter coming up from the lower weight class. But ultimately, Alexander Volkanovski is very, very, very good at fist fighting. And for you to overlook that, for anyone to ever overlook that, would be a grievous error. So, I mean, Islam Makhachev isn't fighting a lightweight here. He isn't fighting, who he thought he was going to fight. But it's still an extremely dangerous fight to accept Alexander Volkanovski if you're anyone on 2 weeks' notice. If you're John Jones and you're fighting Alexander Volkanovski on 2 weeks' notice, you're taking a risk there because that man is very good.
AK, same question. What's at stake for Islam Makhachev? Does he have the most to lose on this entire card tomorrow?
Yeah, he has not the most. I don't know if he has the most to lose in the card. He has more to lose than Volkanovski, that's for sure. If he loses, he's losing to a smaller man. 12 days notice. A guy. It'll kill me because it'll retroactively color the first fight. People will go like, "Oh wow, Volkanovski beat him twice." Like they'll use the 5th round of the first fight and then obviously a potential win on Saturday to like discredit Islam, which is crazy to me because I rewatched that first fight. People check out the Retro Rob review on MMAfighting.com. It's a great website. It was a pleasure to rewatch it for both fighters, but especially for Islam, because I think even though I scored the fight for Islam the first time around, I didn't fully appreciate how good he was in that fight. Not just with the grappling, but with the striking. I think the issue is he's not super theatrical. And there was a lot of show in that fight. Volkanovski had great moments, showing to the crowd, surviving the back control and shouting and then ending the fight on top. And those are the images that people remember. Makhachev didn't really have anything like that, even though he stumbled. He didn't knock him down, but he stumbled Volkanovski once. But he didn't like play it up. He didn't like hit up, crack him, and then go like, yeah, bring it on. Like that's just not what he's going to do. So he really needs this win because there's no. I see a lot of people in the comments saying he's sort of uncharismatic, and I think that's a fair thing to say. And it's not an insult to him. It's not. I always say with fighters, I understand it's prize fighting, it's sports entertainment, whatever you want to call it. part of it is being someone who engages the fans, not just in the cage. But some people, it's hard to do. It's just not their skill. And I think it's almost unfair to hold Islam to that standard. But that is a standard to which he is held. And so, but all he can do, again, he can't control that. He can't change his personality overnight. All he can do is win. And he needs to do this win. He needs to put this Volkanovski feud behind him. And no matter how he wins, again, unless it's some flat out robbery or controversial stoppage, as long as his hand is raised, this chapter of his career is done. And as Shaheen kind of alluded to, perhaps now he can finally move on to breaking the lightweight title defense record by actually defending against lightweights. But it all starts on Saturday. So he doesn't have a ton to gain other than what we kind of mentioned before about, maybe finally getting the pound for pound respect right at the top that he arguably deserves. But other than that, there's going to be a lot of people taking away from the win because the short notice, the smaller opponent. But I'll tell you, I don't think him and his team will care two craps about that if they get out of there with the W and really never have to talk about the Volkanovski fights again, other than to say, wow, weren't those two fights amazing? That's all I hope we say after this. I hope that this feud is resolved. Unless Volkanovski wins, then I'd love to see a trilogy, of course.
It's just
we
crazy.
live in a world. Yeah, we also live in a world where he could just go up. Makhachev could just go up to 170 after this and not defend the title against the current lightweight ranked fighter. It's very possible.
We're in a world where 8 months from now, Islam Makhachev could be tying the UFC's all-time hallowed record, tying Khabib Nurmagomedov's record for most title defenses in this division, and he will have fought one lightweight over that time. It will just be tremendous.
It's wild. Unless somebody falls out and Volk steps in again, and then we do it again.
We get the trilogy. Let's go.
we could get the trilogy. So before we go to predictions, I want to go back to Volkanovski, Shaheen, because something AK said has made a lot of sense, and we've seen it throughout the build to this fight. Volk getting the lion's share of the credit, Makhachev just, whatever. Even though Dana White has really put him over, we're going to put the quote on the Apex wall. Like, it's a huge thing. Doesn't matter. I'm the champion. You asked me to fight somebody, I'm going to say yes. And like I said, I give Makhachev a ton of credit for that. I know you did as well. But if Volkanovski goes out here and does this in Abu Dhabi on 12 days notice, becomes a 2-division champion, beats Islam Makhachev, who has not lost in a very, very long time. In fact, he hasn't even really been in trouble in any fight in a very, very long time, except for round 5 of the Volkanovski fight. What does this mean for Alexander Volkanovski? I don't think he's the greatest of all time, but is he Rushmoreing it? Is he knocking on the door? Is he just one spot behind the velvet rope, Shaheen, if he wins this fight tomorrow?
Well, that depends. I mean, when you say the greatest of all time, do you mean as a featherweight or just as a whole? Because I think he's still pretty far away from as a whole.
People have brought this up. It's a heck of a morning question. Where does Volk enter the greatest?
We just can't escape it. Holy crap. We just cannot escape it.
Though. This is a fair question. It's a fair question here. Many people have saying he might be the best fighter we've ever seen. He's the featherweight champion. Just look like, I want to see the Topuria fight, but if he beats Topuria, ain't nobody beating this man at 145 pounds. But if he goes in on 12 days notice, up a weight class, and beats Islam Makhachev after taking him to the limit in February, does he at least, are you prepared to live in this world where people are going to have that conversation? Is I guess where I will put this, because that conversation is going to happen.
People are going to have dumbass conversations regardless of whether I feel good about it or not. So I don't really care about people's conversations. I literally just did a 3-hour podcast about Anderson Silva like earlier this week with Jeb Bishu and Guilherme Cruz and Eric Jackman. And so I have sworn off having the GOAT conversation until guys are done, because Anderson Silva was 38 years old, 16-0 in the UFC. And then things happen if you just keep going. So I'm not going to keep doing this thing where we call somebody something when they're in the middle of their story rather than the end, because the end still matters on all of this. If Volk wins, we will have a very interesting situation, right? Because he is someone who, of all of the champ sort of dialogue, attempts, everything, every one of these guys is like, oh, I'm going to be a 2-division champ. I'm going to be active in both divisions. I'm going to really just make it work. We're not going to slow anybody down. And then everybody ultimately gets incredibly slowed down and nothing happens in these divisions when it actually works out. And we just get like one title defense a year and just, it's all weird, right? Like Daniel Cormier is the only guy that sort of defended both belts, but even that took so long over the course of his whole heavyweight situation. Like, it bogs down these divisions when we do this champ stuff. Volkanovski's the one guy I believe. When Volkanovski says, I will be an active champ, I will defend at 145, I will fight Ilia Topuria in February, I will fight somebody else in April or May. Like, I believe him, because he's just that guy. Like, we have a paper trail of him just being that guy, of just wanting to, hey, again, I hate to go back to the edge, but I am 35 years old. This window for me is incredibly small right now, and he seems very aware of that. Just let me rack up as many records as I can, as many title defenses as I can. Let's just put these numbers as high as they possibly can be. I believe him when he says he wants to fight Ilia Topuria at the beginning of next year. I believe him when he says he wants to go back and forth and do this as a two-division champ. I think he can. We'll probably end up just seeing the trilogy next, ultimately, because that's what the UFC does. And I don't know that is some real appealing answer, but you never know. We have to see how this plays out on Saturday. But I don't know that it's the end of the world. Like, Jed very much feels like it's the end of the world if Alexander Volkanovski wins on Saturday. I don't subscribe to that notion. I think that if one man can do this and sort of keep this active, especially for two very good divisions like this, it's got to be Volk.
It's the end of Jed's world. That's for sure. I mean, his world is done. His world is done. He's leaving Twitter. I think he said he's just leaving combat sports in general. I think he said he's going to go farm or something. He'll go become a farmer.
No. He said he was going to leave the sport if Volk wins and calls out Conor McGregor. Then he's
that's the one. That's the one. No, he is probably leaving social media in any event if Volkanovski win. But the McGregor thing you'll just never see Jed again. It's like, he'll be fine. He'll be fine. I'm sure he'll be living a happy life somewhere. But he'll have to put this one behind him for that to happen, because it'll be too much. It'll be too much. I am very comfortable putting Volkanovski, and this, I don't think is a hot take at all. I think if you want to say one of the top 10 best pound for pound all time, sure. Very strong argument in there. He's got the title defense of featherweight. If he beats Islam, it's a lock. Now, most of us, though, I think we have a pretty firm, like the top three in some order of John Jones, George St. Pierre, Anderson Silva. And then you can kind of play around with some other ones. Like there's Mighty Mouse, I think I would have in mind, but you also have to take into account Khabib. You have to take into account Fedor. Did I say Fedor already? You have to take into account Jose Aldo. Jose Aldo is an interesting one because he is in the featherweight division with Volkanovski, and then you're not going to have people saying, well, what does it take for him to pass Aldo? I don't think he's done it yet. If people want to say they have because he beat him head to head and just, different opponents, whatever, fine. I'm not making that case right now. So firmly in the top 10 already, a win over Makhachev for me does not immediately put him in the top 5. Does not. I'm sure for some people it will. I have no problem with that. I think as we kind of mentioned, I want to see him pile up the stats just a little bit more. 6, 7, 8 title defenses. It's a lot to ask. I know nobody does that in today's MMA world. But, if he wins the lightweight title, maybe, a couple of more featherweight title defenses, a couple of lightweight title defenses. Then we're having a real conversation. Then we're having a real, like, how do you keep him out of the top 5?
People do that. People do that. Jose Aldo did it. He's a guy who did it. It's a thing that happens. That has happened.
That's a lot.
That
how
has
long
happened
ago
in this division, actually.
Shaheen, do you know how long ago this was now? I don't want to make us sound old. Do you know how long ago this was? His featherweight. That's
Who
6 years ago. It matters. Of course
10 years passed, and I did
I
something
know.
cool 10 years ago that no one else has ever done since.
Wow.
Does that change the fact that I did it? What are we talking about?
No, because I do think there's something to be said about comparing eras. I think certainly when you're talking about other sports, you would look at guys from Bill Russell won 10 and 11 NBA championships. Like, you just can't do that now. Does that mean Bill Russell by default is better than all these guys to go out? No, it's a different atmosphere. It's a different feel. It's still incredible. I think you still, like, those kind of accolades keep you in the conversation forever. But to say those accolades can never be, like, topped without doing the exact same thing, I think is not fair. I think it's not. It's just not how sports works.
Comparing Bill Russell beating janitors in the 60s with modern era basketball, then comparing Jose Aldo with just like 10 years ago.
No,
it's not equivalent to me.
No, but I'm just giving you an extreme example. Like, as eras go along, the standard for what qualifies for all-time greatness, it has to shift. It has to shift. Now, again, if you're me, like I said, I'm probably almost nothing will happen that will bump George St. Pierre, like Anderson Silva, John Jones out of the top. Like, there's almost nothing someone can do unless they won like 20 straight title defenses and went 45. but within reason, there's almost like that. So you're right. There is a limit, I feel like, to where like we don't have to go, oh well, this guy defended it 4 times in this era, which I feel is tougher, so that makes him, that easily makes him better than these guys who fought 10 years ago. I agree that would be a bit absurd. That'd be a bit absurd. But Volkanovski is at 5 title defenses is a lot. If he wins the lightweight title and defends it a couple of times there, and then defends the featherweight title, if we're talking like 8-9 total title defenses, then we're having the conversation. And I get it, and then that's getting closer to the number of the greats, the pound for pound greats that we've been discussing. But again, I don't feel like he necessarily has to do exactly what they did. It would certainly help his case. So, and even just winning on Saturday, if people want to put him in the top 5, you can make an argument for it. You can make an argument for it.
What a world, my friends. All right, prediction time, because we have another big fight to talk about. Shaheen, Islam Makhachev, -250 favorite. Line closing a little bit. Alexander Volkanovski, the featherweight champ, coming back. 12 days notice. +205. Who leaves Etihad Arena? The lightweight champion of the world, Shaheen.
What's that line movement been? It's +205 now. What did it start at?
Well, for context, I have a bet for watch party funsies. I got Volk at +220 yesterday.
Oh, so it's dropping.
Yeah.
Interesting. This is a tough one, man. I have kind of vacillated back and forth throughout this week as we've heard from these guys. We've sort of seen the layout in Abu Dhabi, the lay of the land. It's a really tough one. I think if you go, I like to separate my head from my heart a lot of times with these picks, right? But then I'm always conflicted because I'm such a vibes guy. And if you go with your head, like it feels like Islam Makhachev, he won the first fight. That was not long ago. He should have a lot of that preparation already in the bank already from just doing it 8 months ago. He should win this fight, right? Like we saw that fight play out. He won the majority of that fight. I had it 4-1, 3-2, whatever you want to put it at. He won the majority of that fight. The end was what it was, but we do not judge fights solely based on the end. But the vibes, man. The vibes this week just feel like it's a Alexander Volkanovski week, right? Like this feels like something's happening right now. And sometimes those vibes will lead you astray. Maybe people felt those vibes when Jorge Masvidal was trying to do what he did on short notice against Kamaru Usman, only to get foot stomped into eternity for 25 minutes straight. And we never thought about those vibes again. The vibes can betray you, my friends. They really can. I just have an overwhelming sense right now that the vibes are just immaculate for Team Volkanovski. It feels like something's happening. It feels like this will be something that we will celebrate and remember of him doing this. And I want to hop on that train. I'm going Alexander Volkanovski, 4th round TKO. I just think he can find a way to get to some positions and get something going and get it done ultimately in the end. Islam Makhachev seems to really be banking on the fact that this is not in Australia, that this is in a more friendly territory for him, that the crowd's going to be on his side. And I don't know. And so I don't want to say that fixation has any impact on my opinion on this fight, but it is a little strange. And Volkanovski's picking up on that. And I don't know, just the vibes, man. I can't get over that this feels like we're watching something, the quintessential Volkanovski story play out in front of our eyes right now. And I'm just hopping on that. I have Volk by 4th round TKO.
Damn. AK. And newer and still.
I'm going and still, but it almost changed my mind. Shaheen, a master storyteller and very much painting what would be the most dramatic picture possible, that we could have in this fight. Even better than Volkanovski, like again, getting revenge via decision, but like getting into those championship rounds and pouring on the pace. I like it. And again, I never want to downplay Volkanovski's performance as much as I've been stamping my feet and telling people not to complain about the judging in the first fight. Pretty clear Makhachev victory for me. It would be cool. It would be cool to see Volkanovski turn things around and kind of flip the whole, just take hold of the entire narrative. As much as I would hate to see it affect the first fight, which it should. So I love Volkanovski doing this. I do think that short notice affects both guys. But I think Makhachev, and I'm probably being I'm probably relying too much on what I saw in the first fight, and having just recently rewatched it. I do really believe, skill-wise, he might be the best pound-for-pound fighter in the world right now. I'm trying to figure what Volkanovski could do different, maybe be more aggressive, maybe push the pace more. But he was pretty active in that first fight. I think that's the strongest case for why people are saying he might have won a couple of the earlier rounds, is maybe he was, just doing more. I don't think he was as effective as people think he was at first glance. but he was doing a lot, and it was impressive to watch. It was his pace over 25 rounds was unbelievable. But the wrestling of Makhachev, the underrated striking, Makhachev I think is a really good striker and just does not get credit for it. I'm not sure why. I maybe because the wrestling is so good, they just assume that the striking has to be bad, which is false. I think the size does matter too. I do think there was a power advantage in the first fight. Again, people go back and rewatch it, see who landed the heavier shots. I assure you it was Islam Makhachev. And that's just how physics works, guys. So that's going to play out the second time. I've got Makhachev winning a decision again. I think it's going to be more convincing. And I think it might not be as exciting as the first fight. Because if you guys remember round 4, where Makhachev was finally able to take Volkanovski's back and actually control it for a long stretch of time, I think we actually might see a little bit more of that in this fight as well. So still be a good fight. I think it's a lot to live up to their first encounter. But I will have Makhachev by, again, similar decision, 49-46 or convincing 48-47.
So from a betting perspective, every bet I have on this fight, and it's, well, not necessarily, but in terms of like a side, it's all on Volkanovski. I just thought the value was too good at plus 220. I do have an inside the distance bet at plus 500 for Volkanovski's. But if you're asking me, like, if the odds were completely even, who are you picking? I'm picking Islam Makhachev to win this fight. We've seen it before. We're going to see it again. Makhachev took a lot away from that fight. He's a competitor. Volk took a lot away from that fight. And I feel pretty confident that both those guys have been borderline obsessed with each other since February. At least at some point, they were thinking about moments in that fight, what they could have done better, what they could do better next time around. I do think there's a part of Makhachev that felt maybe I'll fight Volkanovski. And I feel like there's a part of Volkanovski. And if you read ESPN's column that Mark Ramundi wrote, Volk was ready. They went to dinner with Hunter Campbell, him and his manager, at UFC 293, and Volk basically told Hunter Campbell, like, hey, if something happens, call me. I'll take it. And sure enough, phone rang, he took it, and here we are. So I think it's going to be fun. I think Volk will be more aggressive in this fight. I think he's going to come out. He might even win the first round. Volk might come out, win the first round, kind of overwhelm Makhachev. But here's the thing. Volk is so good at making adjustments, and he gets so much credit for it. And I think it's the second Max Holloway fight where everyone really started to pay attention. I think we need to really start paying attention to the adjustments Islam Makhachev can make in a fight as well, because like AK referenced, you could see it in round 4 of their first fight where it looked like the momentum was starting to shift a little bit. Volk was starting to get something cooking, and then Makhachev was like, nah, it's going to take you down, and this is what I'm going to do to you. So I do think this fight is competitive, but I do think in the end, Makhachev does enough to get it done. Could be a 49-46, but maybe a 49-46 that seems closer. But yeah, I got Makhachev winning a decision, but from a betting perspective, it's on Volkanovski with the value that I'm getting. So there you go. Let's move on to the co-main event. Shaheen,
my best friend, I do want to say, we polled the people. We got a very big sample size, over 1,000 votes, 56% Makhachev.
Okay. It's about where I would put it.
I think
I'm not surprised by that.
No, not
I'm not surprised by that at all.
No.
Should be a hell of a fight. Before we actually get to the co-main event, Shaheen, someone asked this question on Heck of a Morning, and I wanted to get your take on this because basically the way he asked this question was somebody had said, dude, this UFC 294 card might be the most stacked of the year. And this person kind of chuckled at him a little bit. And then he goes, why do you feel that way? And he goes, the reason I feel this way is because if I have a feeling that 3, 4, 5 years from now, we're going to look back on this card because of who's fighting in the main event and the co-main event. Could we actually reflect on this card 3 years later, Shaheen, and say the 4 competitors in the main and co-main event were 4 of the 20 best fighters in UFC history?
Maybe. That's an interesting
Isn't that
question.
a great question?
That is a great question. I mean, it's totally possible, right? Like they all have, Volk's already put in that work. Islam obviously has the potential for that kind of trajectory. We've all seen it. Khamzat as well. Kamaru's already put in that work. I mean, we're halfway there already. That's an interesting question. I have not thought of that, but it's possible. It's certainly possible. You let me watch one pay-per-view this year, and I'm watching the next one. I'm watching Jones and I'm watching Pereira Yuri, just because Pereira Yuri is my holy grail. Like that's, I break out into hot sweats anytime I think about that fight. I desperately just want to stay alive long enough to see that fight because that fight is just everything to me. But yeah, that's a really interesting way to frame this. I haven't thought about that. You might be right.
Could this one age like fine wine in that perspective, AK?
That's so great. Who phrased this? This was a listener, or this is one of you gentlemen, you esteemed
This is
gentlemen?
someone asked this on Heck of Morning. I think it might have
Okay.
been Cole. I don't remember who it was, but someone phrased this question. I'm like, wow, that's a really good question.
Yeah, shout out to whoever did, because that's fun. That is such a fun way of MMA is supposed to be fun. I say this all the time, right? That's such a fun way of looking at this. Um, I didn't really answer the first question you asked way back at the top of the show, Mike. Like, is this? I am pretty adamant that I think the card is better now, and when you frame it that way, yeah, I mean, it's so lovely. Yeah, Volkanovski, Usman already in there, so. Khamzat probably is a little bit on the outside looking in. I do think we've a lot of us have gotten the hype train when it started, never really got off. Probably were a little shaken by the stupid UFC 279 fiasco. Like, is this guy serious? Is this guy taking this seriously? But man, the in-cage results are just so spectacular. We were talking on a show earlier today on the weigh-in show. Jose brought it up that like having a highlight reel is so important for your legacy and for how the UFC and fans view you. And Chimaev, through 6 UFC fights, his highlight reel is unbelievable. It is better than some guys have through 15, 16. There's guys who have been 20 fights in the UFC who like have okay highlight reels, nothing near what he has. Fast knockouts, dominant ground and pound, suffocating, like just cobra-like submissions, and then an all-out brawl with Gilbert Burns is awesome. So even if Khamzat does not make the top 20, even if he doesn't make the top 30, he will be remembered, I think, as one of the most memorable fighters of this era, whatever you want to call that, like whatever the 2010s to the 2020s, the 2020s, 2030s, just whatever era we happen to be in now, the Endeavor era, I don't know. He will be memorable. So while Islam, Volkanovski, Usman, I think pretty comfortably could slot into that top 20 all time at some point, even if Khamzat doesn't going to make it, he is part of this story. And that does make me really... That does make me agree with the suggestion that we will look back on 294 and just from the top 4 fights alone, not to mention, I know we're going to get into the rest of the card later, not to mention some of these other promising names, and we're going to be like, yeah, this was something special. You know, no matter who wins the fights, this was something special when it was put together.
I will say,
Of course, Lance, go ahead, please.
Yeah, listening to the weigh-in stream, it blew me away thinking about the Gerald Mearshart thing being as long ago as it was. Like, this has been a 3-year thing for Khamzat Chimaev, and it's just so funny the way that the lifespan of these sort of narratives, right? Because he blows up into our life as this guy taking these short notice fights, fastest turnaround ever, the 10-day turnaround, all of it, the Fight Island, all of the hype. And then what happens? We just don't see him again. Like, he has gone from the most active fighter ever to just like this missing person that we see once a year. The way that this has been handled, and like the way that if you would have painted how the next few years would have played out back then in 2020, it wouldn't have made sense, right? Like, the way that we got to know this guy is so vastly different than the reality that we've sort of been left with over the last 3 years. We barely ever see Khamzat Chimaev. He's not even ranked right now on MMA fighting because we don't even know what to do with him anymore. We took him out of the welterweight ranking. It's like everybody individually, not even like as a team. It's just very weird. This whole Khamzat Chimaev chapter so far has just been incredibly bizarre, and hopefully this is the start of the real run, right? Because I think we've all just been waiting for him to actually get going in fights that matter.
And that's what makes this also interesting, Shaheen, because now Kamaru Usman is stepping in. Sorry, the landscapers are outside, but I think what made this such an interesting choice is that nobody saw it coming. Nobody saw Kamaru Usman coming. We got Russo swerved. And it was just brilliant because this is the fight most people wanted to see a couple of years ago when Chimaev was on the rise and Usman was still the welterweight champion. And the last 11 or so days have been met with, wow, this is really interesting. How about this? And then we get a little bit of drama earlier this week, thanks to Twitter being just an absolute cesspool of caca and poo-poo. It's so bad, man. And we get this whole knee gate from Kamaru Usman and Justin Gaethje at the open workout. People are obviously, they're master lip readers apparently. And it said Usman popped his knee out. Usman has to answer to those people. He's got to answer to the UFC. Even said he had to answer to the UFC doctors once some of those things came out. Knee's good to go. He's good to go. Makes weight at 184.5, I believe. Chimaev looks like a freaking tank with a beard. This fight is, I feel like by the time we get to the actual card on Saturday, as fascinating as the main event is, I feel like this co-main event is what everyone's going to be psyched about, Shaheen. Where are you at with this fight after 11 days of craziness?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right. And the fact is, we've seen the main event before, and we've seen it recently, right? Like, it was amazing. It was spectacular. It was fight of the year for me still as the front runner. But we've seen it. So we have some level of expectation. I have no idea what the expectation should be for this co-main event. I've been waiting for this. We've all been waiting for this forever. For, like I just said, for 3 years for Khamzat Chimaev to get this sort of proper matchmaking escalation. We thought we got it with the Gilbert Burns fight, and that was amazing. That was a fight of the year contender in and of itself, and it taught us a lot about Khamzat Chimaev. But then since then, it has not been an escalation. It's been a de-escalation, right? We went from that to Nate Diaz and Kevin Holland. Like, it didn't make sense the way that the UFC sort of manufactured this run for him. So this is certainly going to be the most intriguing part of the night for me, because whatever you think of Kamaru Usman, if you think he's done, if you think he's past it, if you think he's washed up, that's certainly not what you thought a year ago, right? Like, things change quickly, and I get it. He's sort of at that age where things will change quickly, but I still have Kamaru Usman as one of the best damn fighters in the entire world. And I mean, Khamzat Chimaev was a welterweight until very recently. So this matchmaking still is intriguing to me. And also, again, man, I can't get it out of my head of the potential now for the weirdest possible scenario in this middleweight division, because this middleweight division deserves weirdness, and that's just what it brings. It rots to itself, right? Is all sorts of weirdness forever. And there is no weirder circumstance than all of a sudden Sean Strickland winning the title, Kamaru Usman getting this short notice situation, and the rematch that we all knew we would eventually see at UFC 210 when they fought on the deep prelims of this card right before a Mike De La Torre fight, that these two guys would fight again for the 185-pound title a few years later. Like, it just doesn't make sense, but nothing about middleweight makes sense. And the UFC loves nothing more than to punish and be vindictive. And you're over here, if you're DDP, who obviously should fight for this middleweight title next, you didn't take a short notice fight. These guys did. They're going to jump you just because that's the way these guys, Dana White and the rest of these guys, think. It's on the table, and it's just the most bizarre possible outcome for all this. And it seems like at 185, the most bizarre outcome tends to happen.
Okay, this is one of those fights where I feel like I have a really good read on what's going to happen, but then the deeper I dive into it, I'm like, I have no effing clue what I'm talking about, because this thing could go a number of different ways. And I think the more we've gotten closer to tomorrow, the more interested I've gotten in this fight. I still would have preferred the Costa fight for the reasons I talked about earlier, but this is still a tremendous plan B, and maybe better than any other realistic option that was out there. One of the options, which I talked about at Heck of Morning a couple weeks ago, once this fight was made, I said I would tell the story. And now that it's out there in another outlet, you want to know who the first phone call was to fight Khamzat Chimaev? Sean Strickland. They were going to do the Sean Strickland fight. It's crazy. It's freaking crazy.
If
but
only.
Out of all the names on the table during that wacky 48-hour stretch of trying to figure out whether or not Paul Costa was going to fight or not, Kamaru Usman wasn't even on the list. So here we are a day later. Where are we at with this fight? Two welterweights fighting at middleweight, and the stakes could not be higher on 12 days notice.
I love it, because we say this is the kind of weirdness in MMA that I can get behind, because we say it all the time. Like, we hate seeing extreme weight cutting, and the jump from welterweight to middleweight is considerable. This is more than the lighter weight classes. This is when you start reaching 15-pound difference territory. So if in a perfect world, again, I would have loved to see these guys fight at 170. I get it, and it's certainly a better scenario for Kamaru Usman, because Khamzat Chimaev is a large man. Asking him to cut down to 170, even if he makes it, it's going to take something out of him on fight night. So if this had happened during Usman's championship reign, it would look very different. The odds would look very different. Our expectations would be very different. As it stands, and also, again, this would have been 18 months ago, 2 years ago, this would have happened. So we got to bring age into account here as well, because as it stands, it feels like, even though I'm so excited about getting this fight, I have no problems with the way it's come together. It is different than if we had seen Khamzat challenge for the title. I think Usman still would have been favored. Maybe not huge, because there was a ton of hype behind Khamzat at the time. There has been really for the last 4 years. It doesn't matter how often he's fought. 4 years, 2 years, 2 years, 4 years. Anyway, however long ago, 3 or 4 years. Now the odds are, I believe, Chimaev something minus 200, or above that. And that, it seems crazy and it seems odd, and yet it also just makes a strange amount of sense. We are viewing Khamzat as the more natural middleweight. we are viewing Usman as the older fighter who is coming off of losses. I thought he looked very good in the Leon Edwards fight. I didn't think he won. I didn't think that fight was controversial. I thought a pretty convincing win for Leon Edwards. But Usman didn't look bad at all. He looked good. He looked very good. But once you hit a certain age in fighting, and you have as much mileage as Usman, he's 36, and he's a hard 36, man. This guy's been fighting for a long time and fighting at a high level. The quality of opponents he's had to go through and go the distance, 5 rounds. It's a ton of mileage. And when you start to decline, I think you just start to decline pretty quick. He might still look great in the scale. He probably still looks amazing in training. Hashtag best camp ever. Hashtag no camp. I can't even say he had the best camp ever. Hashtag no camp. He still looks like he's in great shape. And is a guy who I think is pretty much training all year round as long as he's healthy. But I can only sort of hang on to that notion that this guy is still, in championship form for so long. So I love this fight. I'm a little worried come fight night, it might not play out as competitively or as an exciting a fashion as we're all hoping for.
Oh, well, you segued me perfect. Let's get into it because there's a million other things. We could talk about Chimaev's scary faces during co-interviews. We could talk about everything else that went down. I will say this before we get to picks. Chimaev looks like an absolute ginormo. He is humongous. That ceremonial weigh-in face-off, Usman's looks damn good getting off the bus, and he looks like he could be a full-time middleweight. Chimaev looks like he's knocking on the door of cruiserweight right now at like 220. He looks huge, and that is going to be such a fascinating part of this fight. So Shaheen, currently, according to our friends at DraftKings, Khamzat Chimaev, the favorite, -340. The comeback on the former welterweight champion of the world, Kamaru Usman, +270. Who gets it done?
Not only does Khamzat look huge, he's going to get longer window than normal to recover all of that weight, right?
Yep.
Like the rehydration period between this one is much longer than we usually get just because of the time difference in Abu Dhabi. So, hey man, I agree with you. Seeing that face off was interesting to say the least. Ultimately for me, this fight comes down to a simple fact that Kamaru Usman is a 36-year-old who has done it all. One of the greatest ever in his weight class, easily. Top 2 welterweight of all time. All the title defenses. He has all that. But he's also a 36-year-old who's done it a lot, has a lot of mileage on him, and has bad knees, and has had bad knees for a while. And we were able to sort of foretell his downfall eventually, right? We were talking about this in the last few years of his title run of like, he is creeping up there in age, and he has that wear and tear. Eventually something's going to happen. And it did against Leon Edwards twice. And meanwhile, on the other side, Khamzat Chimaev out there, hungry, 29 years old, in his absolute prime, just ready to start making his mark on this sport. It just feels like these two guys are meeting each other at wrong times in their career. I wish we could have gotten this fight a couple years ago. I think this is going to be a competitive fight. I think Kamaru Usman will have his moments, but ultimately I think Khamzat Chimaev wins in a fairly decisive fashion and goes on to fight for the middleweight title because that's how spiteful the UFC are.
AK, what's the pick here?
I agree with everything Shaheen said about Usman's, again, the age, the wear and tear I mentioned before as well. I don't want to harp on it too much because I also want to put some of the shine back on Chimaev. I think this guy is who we think he is. I think all the hype that we've seen, as much as it sucks that we haven't got to see him compete as much as we wanted to, every time he steps in there, it's exciting. I don't want to hear, again, Mike, you and I say this all the time. We don't want to hear anyone say that the Gilbert Burns fight was some sort of mark that should be held against Khamzat Chimaev. That's absurd. That fight, if anything, proved his toughness. Maybe not his smarts. Maybe he should have used his wrestling more. But as far as his toughness, going hammer and tongs with Gilbert Burns for 3 rounds, that was awesome. That was one of the best fights of the year. I don't think it won our fight of the year, but it finished in the top 5. Such a great fight. And again, Khamzat could have been smarter. If he wasn't more careful, hell, he probably could have lost that fight. But that was a big, big, big test for him. Gilbert Burns is an awesome fighter. And the fact that Chimaev was able to win the decision there says a lot about his ability. So we can say everything we want about Usman, not being, maybe being 80% of what he was, right? I still think there's a chance that Chimaev could have beaten the best version of him. I think Chimaev is that good. I'm that much of a believer in his wrestling, his ground and pound, his just raw power. I don't think he's a better striker technically than Usman, but that might not matter the way this fight's going to play out on Saturday. So I'm all in on the Chimaev train still, and I think anyone who hopped off is going to be back on. I think Chimaev is going to win by knockout. I'll go there.
So I have a bet on this fight. It's Khamzat Chimaev inside the distance. I think I got it like minus 115 or something like that, and you'll see them all in the watch party. But here's the thing. Would I be surprised if Kamaru Usman went in there and chin-checked Khamzat Chimaev and knocked him unconscious? I would not be surprised at all. I would react like, wow, I can't believe that just happened. But I would also react the same way if Khamzat Chimaev just one-punched Kamaru Usman unconscious, just like any other fight in the world. But I wouldn't be like shocked if Usman wins this fight. And you mentioned the Gilbert's fight, AK, and I think Kamaru Usman may have to go back to that fight in order to win. Because if this is a technical, let's have a wrestling match, I'm going to test my American wrestling versus yours, Khamzat, what you bring to the table, it's going to be a bad, bad night for Kamaru Usman. Kamaru Usman's takedown defense is really, really good. It's one of the highest we've ever seen. And that might be very helpful in this fight, because if at any point in this fight, ladies and gentlemen, Khamzat Chimaev takes Kamaru Usman down and Usman ends up on his back and Chimaev ends up on top of him, this fight is over. Khamzat is going to rain terror upon this man. But if Usman's takedown defense can hold up and he can keep this fight standing and this becomes a kickboxing match, I'm not saying Chimaev can't win it, but Usman has a very good chance of winning that kind of a fight. And if Usman comes up and just kind of has that, not get or get got attitude, but like a step below that where he's minding his P's and Q's, but is a little more reckless than we're used to seeing him, I think he's got a real good chance of winning this fight. If he can lure Chimaev into a battle, like an absolute stand-up war, I think he's got a shot. But if this turns into a battle against the fence, Chimaev is going to get that man down, and then he's going to absolutely pummel him until this fight is over. So my pick is a super fun fight. I think Usman might have Usman might even hurt him in the first round. He might land something big, but then Chimaev's going to get his wits about him. He's going to get this fight to the ground, and he's just going to smash this man. So give me Khamzat Chimaev inside the distance. I don't know if it's going to be a submission or a TKO, but eventually this fight's going to hit the mat, and it's all Chimaev once it does. So there you go. That's anybody?
I just want to say the YouTube vote, 69% Chimaev. So pretty firmly in the big band's corner.
Yes. We also got Magomed Ankalaev versus Johnny Walker, a pretty high stakes fight that no one's talking about, which is crazy to think about with all these changes in 12 days. One of these guys could be fighting the winner of the co-main event of UFC 285. I mean, if Jamal Hill's not ready to go, it's going to be one of these guys. And there's a lot riding on not only the fight itself, but the performance of the man who wins. Because if we get a lackluster 30-27 from either guy, they ain't getting a title shot. But if one of these guys goes out and gets a big finish, they just might. Ikram Aliskerov is back. He's the biggest favorite on the card. Said Nurmagomedov is back. We get Tim Elliott, Islam Makhachev, amongst other fights. So before we go to the peeps, Shaheen, low-key banger. What's the fight outside of the top two that you are most intrigued in, and why?
That's tough because it is a good lineup, right? You look up and down, you can find little nuggets here and there for most of these fights that'll keep you intrigued. I would say two for me, right? Tim Elliott, Muhammad Makhachev inherently, because I am still on the Muhammad Makhachev train. I'm very interested to see how he handles a jump up in competition. This has been something we've sort of been waiting for him to get this kind of leveling up against the guys that he's facing. It hasn't really been an impressive slate of opposition for him so far, but also he's very young. 4-0 in the UFC is ultimately 4-0 in the UFC in 3 of those finishes. You can't discount it. I just also kind of really love what Tim Elliott's doing recently. The pettiness of, this is totally unrelated to the actual fight itself, but the pettiness of sponsoring the BKFC fighter for reasons that you can go ahead and look up. I'm here for that kind of pettiness always. And so I don't know. I'm very intrigued in this fight, but also I will say, I'll throw it out there because I know Casey, give a shout out to Casey's boy, Victor Henry, Javid Basharat. That's a banger. That's an absolute banger. Javid Basharat might be a guy in this bantamweight division, like a capital, all caps guy in this bantamweight division sooner rather than later. And Victor Henry's always in very fun fights. And I know Casey's got a soft spot for him. So Those two will have my attention.
Shaheen, have you seen the betting lines for that fight?
For the Victor Henry fight, I would assume Victor is a very big underdog.
Javid Basharat is a minus 535 favorite against Victor Henry.
Tough scenes. Yeah. What do you think about that, Casey? They're calling out your boy.
Plus 400, Casey. Go get it.
Weak salt. Yeah. All right. Whatever. Betters. Do your thing.
AK, Loki banger.
I like the opener, man. I think they're starting this card off right with Shara Bullet and Blindado Silva. Blindado, one of the underrated action guys in the UFC. I think I hope he doesn't get lumped into the middleweight blob, because he is not that guy. He generally, again, either has really good stand-up fights, or someone is getting KO'd. I think that's going to be the case here. I think Shara's favored. I think I'm probably picking him to win by knockout. It could easily go the other way. Blindado is so dangerous, but this is the right test for a guy like Shara Bullet, who is entering the UFC with plenty of hype. Some people thought he could have been signed like last year. They said, he maybe could have come even sooner. He's an intriguing cat, and I think right off the bat they're gonna set the tone for what it's going to be a memorable show.
I love that pick a lot. I wish this fight was a little higher on the card, just so I could see it, because I don't even know if I'm going to be able to catch it live. But man, Shara Bullet is so fun to watch. The dude is a wrecking ball. So great way to start off the card. Nathaniel Wood has been on a nice run. Muhammad Naimov going back to 145. This is a dude that was losing on the cards to Jamie Malarkey and then iced him in a short notice debut up a weight class. And now he's going down to fight Nathaniel Wood, who's looked real good at 145. There's a lot to like here. There's a lot. Trevor Peeks freaking fighting Muhammad Yahya. That is going to be absolute mayhem because Trevor Peeks involved. There's some good fights here. Some good fights, some potential squash matches, and intrigue up the top. That's kind of what you're looking for to check off all the boxes for a pay-per-view event. So we will bring in E. Casey Leiden, the disgruntled E. Casey Leiden, after hearing those betting lines. Maybe he's happy about those betting lines. Maybe he knows something that we don't, and he might cash in on a plus 400 underdog. But let's hear from the peeps, Casey. UFC 294.
Let me just say, poor Nathaniel Wood. That dude is never going to get a fight that matters ever. Like, he's going to be winning. He's going to be winning in the UFC for like 8 years and just never get a chance to fight anybody of consequence. It's tough, bro.
It's pretty wild, man.
Yeah,
looking at
like, you would think after the Andre Fili one, they would give him the guy. They would give him somebody like a Barboza or somebody. But nah, man. You keep fighting these tough dudes no one knows.
Yep.
Yeah, why is that? He's an exciting fighter.
Very marketable, has like a big fan base.
I don't good personality. That's a weird one. All right, yeah, you're right.
Also, I am all for an increased usage in the word blob on this podcast / video network. I think blob is heavily underused, and frankly, that's on us.
We have to be gentle with it. We have to be gentle with it, though. I think we want to use it to describe, concepts and not necessarily people. I think describing people, it could get a little ugly. We don't want to do that. So, we're polite around here.
Middleweight blob is perfect usage. Perfect usage.
I'm gonna try to fit that in once per podcast.
Do it.
All right. I've got so many questions about this, and we kind of talked about it, but I don't know. I feel Shaheen just likes talking about it.
Don't do it, Casey. God damn it! I knew you were gonna do it.
Does a win on Saturday make Volk the GOAT? No. Next question.
Yeah. Thank you.
You can't do it. Yeah. Just can't do it. Not yet.
I don't have this.
I wish New York Rick was here. He's the one person that likes that question more than Shaheen does. Are the featherweight and lightweight divisions screwed if Volk pulls off the upset on Saturday? So for those who have listened to all of our shows or watched all of our shows, this is one of the points of contention Jed has had when it comes to booking this fight, is because it could screw up both of these divisions if Volkanovski wins. So do you have that concern here, Shaheen, about this fight? If Volk wins, are you concerned that lightweight becomes even more stagnant than it's been, and that featherweight slows down a little bit, because that is a super deep division that's still on the rise, but not really there just yet?
Mildly, but not really, right? Like, we talked about this when we were talking about the main event, or at least I did. Like, if there's anybody that I trust to be this guy, to be this active 2-division champion in these 2 very interesting divisions, it's Alexander Volkanovski. Just because he has the receipts. He has shown us he is willing to be of the Max Holloway, give me all of the flavor of cupcakes. I just want to eat every cupcake type of style of matchmaking. And I'm here for that, right? Like if anybody can do it, it's Volk. That being said, he's still human. So like, obviously things will slow down probably a little bit. But I don't know. I believe him.
Oh, I
You're
think he screws
concerned.
the featherweight division big time.
What's that?
Yeah,
Why?
Because he just why? I mean, why would he? He doesn't.
To break records.
He's not interested in
I think
breaking
Volk
Otto's
cares about
record.
that.
He's not
I think-
interested in breaking Otto's record.
Yeah, he is. I think Volk is very much invested in going down
I
as
think-
the featherweight goat.
I think he'll go for 70. I think he's one of those guys. I think he's going to do a little Connor, just keep going up.
There is no way on earth that short man
He
is going to
should
try to
do
go
that.
for the welterweight title.
See how excited Mike got about it? He's like, ooh.
No, I'm not.
like-
No. I'm not excited about it, but he should absolutely do that because that's what Makhachev's been talking about the whole build to this fight. If I win this fight, I'm going up to 170. I'm really serious about it. Well, why give? I'm not going to give Makhachev a rematch. I'm going to go up to 170. You even said it, Shaheen. The window is short, and you think the UFC wouldn't at least entertain that idea? Because they certainly would.
They
But
would
he'd have to vacate the featherweight title to do that, though. And I'd be totally fine with that. In fact, if he wins tomorrow, I kind of hope he vacates the featherweight title. I don't understand
That-
why you
I
need
like
to carry
that.
both
This is why
belts.
this is so dumb.
I like that
This
a
is
lot.
So dumb.
It's
This
so
is
dumb.
This is so
And if
dumb.
Makhachev wants to go up to 170,
Defend the title.
Awesome.
Win, break records. Win the break records. Go down as the best in that division. That's the point.
I'm
Do that.
fine. I agree. I agree with all of this, but just pick one. If you're going to fight for 2 belts, great. Have a plan to vacate 1 belt. We don't need the 2-division thing. Just because, like, if Volkanovski entered this fight and said, I'm vacating the featherweight title and then wins the lightweight title, are we going to be like, well, it doesn't matter because he vacated the featherweight title? No, he's still going to go down as a 2-division champion, just like John Jones, just like some of these other guys. None of this shit matters. And if Makhachev wants to go up to 170, bless you. Go do it. But vacate the lightweight title before you do it because it's still the same. We're still going to view you in the same light as all the other guys who won 2 belts. Just vacate. Let's move these divisions along. That's the answer to all of this. If you want to go for 2-belt status, awesome. But dump one of them when you win it, or if you win it, or before.
If Volk wins on Saturday, and then the UFC books him against the welterweight champion, I am personally sending an EMT and a police officer to Jed Meshu's house to do a welfare check on him because I am very deeply concerned about the health of my friend at that point.
I actually think Jed would be okay with that.
he'd be better, more so with that than the McGregor. I don't know, actually. I think
No, he wouldn't.
maybe equally upsetting.
If he vacated the featherweight title to do it, I think Jed would be all right with it.
Maybe that takes us back to, I think, the specific wording of this question: are the divisions screwed? No, they're not screwed. They're not screwed. Is it ideal for either one? I don't think so. But yeah, there are big fights still be made, even if Volkanovski leaves. And Mike, you've pointed out, of course, the perfect situation in Toronto. If my while pointing out my silly Barbosa Ilia Topuria pick, that they can easily. The division can move on with Max Holloway fighting Ilia Topuria for a interim or vacant title, depending what happens in the event of a Volkanovski win. So that division will move along. Plenty of great fights there. Lightweight will be a little bit murky. But again, if Volkanovski just stays at lightweight, then there's a lot of big fights to be had there. So they're not screwed. They're not screwed. Does it become a bit irritating to sort of work out the permutations that could happen in these two divisions should Volkanovski win? Yeah, it's gonna give us headaches for a bit. Jed will be shouting a lot, but I don't think it'll take long for it to settle down and for us to kind of find enjoyment in these divisions again. So I'm not that worried about it.
There ain't nothing murky about Volkanovski versus Justin Gaethje. No murkiness at all.
Great fight.
Just sign me up for that. Sign me up for that. Or Volk versus Charles Oliveira.
Volk versus Alex Pereira, he's coming from
Let's do it.
We're just
After he
doing
wins the
it.
170,
We're
just go.
letting this go.
Go fight Sean Strickland. Avenge the loss of your buddy. Let's go. The sky's the limit.
One thing I find interesting is, like, we talk about Volk winning, but no one's talking about a direct trilogy, immediate trilogy. Why not?
I think that's part of this
if
question.
If Volk
though.
wins, there will be a trilogy.
Yeah, I think that's part of. I think that's part of Joseph Boza's question is like, because you factor that in as well, how much is that going to hurt both divisions if Volk wins and we get a media
If
trilogy?
Volk wins,
But are we going to get a trilogy? Do you think?
Well, I'll pay it.
I think they would. Yes.
I will. Yeah. If Volk wins, they're going to let him defend the title against Ilia Topuria, the featherweight title, if he wants to do that. And then his next fight will be against Islam Makhachev. Like they're just at that point, that's what we're stuck in. We're stuck in the DC Stipe 3 years of heavyweight type of cycle.
Even if Volk runs him tomorrow, you think that's the case?
Yeah, I do.
I agree. I'm with Shaheen.
I don't know.
They will run it back.
I'm not saying
I don't know either. I don't know either, honestly, because I'm not 100% sold on that. I'm not saying Islam is seen as like Aljamain Sterling, and since like Sterling absolutely deserves a rematch against O'Malley, but he's just not getting one because
he's not gonna get it.
This isn't a real sport, or I
think
don't know what this is.
I think the UFC is invested in Islam Makhachev. They're invested
I
in that
agree.
region. They have told his story very well for them, right? We grade on a scale. They don't tell a lot of guys' stories well. They've told his story very well. The connection with Habib will always be there. And ultimately, he has a very powerful manager who has a lot of sway with the UFC. And he's doing the UFC a solid here. He's doing them a favor by accepting this fight to begin with and throwing off the quotes that he's throwing off that Dana White's going to put at the wall of the UFC office. Like, he will get a rematch if he loses, regardless of how he loses.
But
if he wants it.
That powerful manager also manages the number one contender as well.
And so wouldn't you know it, Justin Gaethje will be fighting for an interim title while we're waiting.
Is it? Oh God! Never mind. I was going to say something.
He also manages another maybe potential free agent Bellator champion. Who knows? Who might be coming over. It could get crazy. So,
we're gonna get Justin Gaethje and Patty Pimblett for the interim title after Patty fights Tony Ferguson. What a world!
Joseph Boza,
that fight's not happening. I don't know what you're talking about. That fight.
Joseph Boza, do you feel better now? Do you feel better? We've laid out some pretty great lightweight and featherweight scenarios, so don't worry about it. Sleep tight, my friend. Sleep tight.
Love you, Joseph. Love you.
Yeah. Where does Walker go with a KO win over Ankalaev, or even a win over Ankalaev? Where does Walker go with the lost Ankalaev? Great preview show today. Love you guys. Big Johnny Walker fan, apparently.
We love you too, Forrest Daniels. We really do.
This fight is so underappreciated, the importance of this fight. This fight is just as important as the co-main event, I feel.
Sure.
Well, you know why. You know why it's underappreciated. Does nobody know why? Okay, I'll tell you why. It's because both these guys have incredibly boring performances, like littering their recent records. Like that's just the reality of the situation. There's a very high chance that this fight sucks, and like I don't subscribe to the Ankalaev Blachowicz fight sucked narrative that seems to just be pervasive. Like
because of Dana White.
I feel like Dana White really like poisoned the well on that because that fight was like perfectly fine and it was actually really courageous performance by Ankalaev. But ultimately, like half of these guys' fights suck recently, and I think there's a decent chance this one could suck. So I think that's probably why.
Yeah,
I think
we're
it has
talking
more
entertainment. We're not talking actually sport here. We're just talking.
I don't
know.
UFC,
Casey.
Yeah, I know. I'm just.
Either way, I don't know if I agree with. I don't know if I agree with Shaheen on that, but I will say it's also like. Light heavyweight is so screwed up right now. It's hard to look at any fight and say like, oh, well, this person's definitely guaranteed to get a light heavyweight title shot. All we know is Yuri Prochazka is fighting Alex Pereira. Fingers crossed, nothing crazy happens. Someone leaves there with the light heavyweight title and then is healthy enough in the next 12 months to defend the title at least one. That's all we have right now. That's all we have because we just don't know. The last year of the light heavyweight situation has been so bizarre, maybe the most bizarre stretch in the history of that title's history. Anyway, in that title's history. So I think we're also a little hesitant to go like, well, obviously Ankalaev is a top 5 light heavyweight. He should get a title shot if he wins. If Johnny Walker beats him, he would take that spot. He should get a title shot if he wins. I'm just not comfortable trying to predict anything going forward past Prochazka Pereira. So that I think that's an element as well.
This one will determine whether or not the light heavyweight title will be defended quickly or it's going to be a long time. Because if this fight stinks, they will wait till next October for Jamal Hill. They will do that. If one of these guys gets a quick finish, and we don't know, Jamal Hill could be back sooner. We don't know how bad the injury is. Jamal seems like a guy that wants to rehab very quickly, so he could be good to go by like International Fight Week or something. But if one of these guys goes out there and just melts the other, and they're just like Pereira, Prochazka, who people are going to want to see, especially if Prochazka wins to make up for lost time. One of these guys could slide right in there before Jamal Hill. It's very possible. But to me, I'm not even like Johnny Walker, cool. I think outside of the actual main event, I think more is riding on Magomed Ankalaev tomorrow than anybody else on this card. A win is not enough for this man. He needs to go out and destroy Johnny Walker, and he's going to do it in an impressive and entertaining way. Because I think he's the best 205er in the UFC. I really do. No, I think everyone's going to have a hard time with this guy. But he's not going to sell one pay-per-view. Not one.
He needs to change the narrative. He needs to. There's a narrative around him right now that is kind of true, but not really true, and a lot of it's because of Dana White, and he really badly needs to change that narrative.
Yeah, he goes out there and works Johnny Walker and finishes him. He gains a ton here, and same with Johnny Walker, because the Anthony Smith fight left a bad taste in people's mouths when it comes to Johnny Walker. So this is a very important fight, not just for the stakes meritocratically, but for where these guys could go. A win is not enough here. It's got to be a fun fight, or it's got to be an impressive, thrilling finish that makes the Bob O'Reilly video, or at least somewhere close to that. And it's not fair. It shouldn't be that way, but that's where we're at right now, which especially with Jamal Hill lurking.
Okie dokie.
Also, I see DB in the comments asking, when does this card start? 7 Pacific, 10 Eastern.
AM, baby.
Love it. I love it. I love it so much.
Will Ikram get the fast track towards the title picture with another impressive finish?
Oh, by the way, sorry, before we get to this question, I just blanked out there for a second. I want to add, did you guys see... this happens. I have moments where my mind just because I'm researching.
Hey,
guys. Okay.
Obviously, I listen to you guys because I'm commenting based on the start time question. Did you guys see that the prelims will be on ESPN MMA's YouTube? Did you see that? Okay, so it's in the email. It's in. We all get the ESPN whatever. Plus, we get the email like the broadcast schedule. So it is noted ESPN MMA's YouTube. Now, I actually couldn't find it this morning because I live in Canada. We don't have. It's kind of tied to ESPN Plus. So I'm only speaking for Americans here. Sorry for all the international people in the comment section. I know we have a lot of them, but I believe you guys. I'll put the link in our Slack. Maybe I believe you guys in the United States, the good old US of A, can watch the prelims for free. I don't think you need ESPN Plus. It is just geo-locked. It is just geo-locked to the United States. I think you will see it on YouTube. We will have a live stream post on MMA Fighting. So technically, you can watch the 8 UFC 294 prelims on MMAfighting.com. So I just want to let people know we're your one-stop shop for MMA coverage. And this time, in a rare occasion, we will actually have it looks like we'll have pay-per-view prelims on our website. So please hop on in, guys.
Great website.
10 a.m. prelim start time. 10 a.m. ET prelim start time. 7 a.m. That's right. Pacific time.
Breakfast and violence, baby. Breakfast and violence.
Yes. Will Ikram? I mean, this will not be on the free prelims, but AK, will Ikram get the fast track if he finishes Warley Alves?
You are muted.
Yeah, sorry.
So
I don't think so. I know we've got he's got a fair bit of hype behind him. Competed for good organizations before the UFC. He's got a nice win streak, at least 7 straight if he wins on Saturday. He beat a very tough Phil Haas in his first fight. Fast track, no, and only because I think also middleweight, the top like the contenders picture is actually like looking okay at the moment. We kind of talked about Trickus is in there. We said, the co-main event title implications there. I'm not saying he's far off, but I don't think he'll be fast track. I think fast track is a bit would be the wrong phrase to use here. I think he needs to win like 4 fights. If you consider 4 fights to be fast tracking,
he's already been fast tracked. He was he originally supposed to face Costa? Is that true?
That's the thing.
So Costa and Imavov, 2 guys who are top 10 based off 1 win in the UFC. Is that correct?
So he would have been fast tracked if Izzy was still the champion, because they needed contenders for Izzy. Mm-hmm. Now they don't need contenders for Izzy nearly as bad. The deck is reshuffled. Right. So I think there is not a level of urgency at 185 to get any potential new exciting challenger up there as fast as possible. That does not exist anymore. So I think if this was a different world where Izzy was still champion, the answer to this question would be yes. But right now, as it stands, I think it's no.
Yep. I don't know if that's true. I'll tell you what.
Best friend.
I'll tell you what. if Khamzat Chimaev runs over Kamaru Usman and then wins the middleweight title, they are absolutely going to fast track Ikram Al-Askarov. Because there's a story here. There's a story.
Yeah,
Who has Khamzat Chimaev put over more in his career than Ikram Al-Askarov? The answer is nobody. That includes Gilbert Burns or anybody else he's fought. He says to this day, by far the hardest fight of my career was Ikram Al-Askarov. They will build this thing to some point.
And for people who don't know,
I disagree.
For people who don't know, Chimaev is the 1 in 14-1 of Ikram Al-Askarov's record. For people who are unaware,
yes.
He is the 1.
And it was good, and it's a fun fight to watch. By the way, Ikram Al-Askarov's going to fight for the middleweight title at some point. He's that good.
I agree with that.
The fact that this man had a fight on Dana White's Contender Series to get into the UFC is a travesty. It's an absolute travesty. He is so much better than most of the guys that have come off the show. He is incredibly good. And don't let the opening stages of the Phil Haas fight fool you. He's going to kill Warley Alves tomorrow. He's just going to do it. This guy's real, real good. You'll see.
I agree with the
title very soon.
I agree with the second point you made. I think the first one is maybe just a little misguided, just because the way that 185 is shaped right now, there are so many people that need to get through this line, right? Whether it's DDP, is he coming back? Whoever wins this fight on Saturday, like the middleweight is just really backed up right now in a way that I don't think they're expediting anybody.
Yeah, maybe. But you have to think about the guys that are behind Izzy, because like we don't know when Izzy's coming back. That's one. DDP,
but that's the thing. That looms, right? That's always somebody who could shortcut the line. And then DDP is there. And then this winner will be
Romy
there.
Dolidze are fighting. I don't think, Cannonier will have somewhat of a case. But I don't know.
He weighed in, Mike. Mike, he weighed in. He's guaranteed. He weighed in.
I don't know if
Weighed in is the ultimate decider, Mike. He was the backup fighter.
How
could you not give it to him? He was the backup fighter.
I mean, we got Paul Craig and Brennan Allen about to headline at the Apex for the middleweight title. Like, that's a huge fight. But Ikram Al-Askarov might just get above both of those guys. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. But he's got to go out there and do work and look like a minus 700 favorite tomorrow.
Yeah, I think everyone's kind of correct. I think the big thing is going to be just timing, in sense of who's ready, who's not available, the region the pay-per-view's in. Is it like the Saudi Arabia? Is it going to be a pay-per-view? Do we know? Or
fight it.
But I'm sure it's going to be a really loaded fight night type of for Saudi Arabia. So who knows? And we also got a young man named Bo Nickel coming up the way too. So don't forget him.
And now that we've said all this, Warley Alves first round knockout. By the way, now Warley Alves, it doesn't matter. He's gonna just shock the world and just jump back up to 185 and just.
Is that would that be the biggest shocker on the main, at least on the main card?
Yeah,
that would be pretty stunning.
Warley is showing up to get a paycheck. I mean, he has not fought at one. Wow. No, I mean he has not fought at. Listen, he has not fought at 185 for a long time. He's not.
You're talking about Usman? Why do you say the same thing about Usman? why is Warley get this paycheck?
Are we comparing Warley and Usman
I'm comparing.
Is this the road we want to go down?
Trying to live their dream. I'm trying trying to just get that check. Yeah. Why doesn't Kamaru Usman get that whole? He's just doing it for the money.
I think Usman has a chance to win. I don't think Warley Alves does. I think that's pretty clear. I don't think. And I like Warley. He was the.
You like it when you buds with him?
So cool.
We might be. He was the Ultimate Fighter Brazil middleweight winner. All right, he kind of already has a middleweight title under his belt.
God.
Okay, he's got one of those. He's got one of those Ultimate Fighter plaques at home at 185 pounds, certified. But it's been a long time, and I do think he's being trotted out to get smashed. So,
does Usman have a middleweight belt? Does Usman have a middleweight belt?
Nope. No. So he doesn't have a plaque. He does have an Ultimate Fighter plaque, but at 170.
I was just gonna say
170, whatever. Welterweight. What else has he done there?
Only 170 pounds. Yeah.
This is just such a clear demonstration of how obscenely cruel the fight game is. Because if you go back to 2015 when Warley just subbed Colby Covington, he was the guy, man. He was the next big thing, and now y'all are just talking about him like he's me. They're trotting out there to fight.
Chael Sonnen was his coach on the Ultimate Fighter, and on the show
he's 32.
He's 32. Warley,
he's not even an old man. He's still in his young,
long time.
How
old is he in fight years? How old is he in fight years though? He's been fighting for a long time.
He's 31 years.
Okay, we're at 12. He's at the 12-year mark. But Chael Sonnen once said this guy would be a future UFC champion. So There's still time. I don't know.
That'd be incredible. Like if he knocks out Ikram Alexander tomorrow, the reaction on the watch party is going to be incredible.
86
Prove me wrong,
seconds.
Worley.
He subbed Colby in 86 seconds, and this
Certainly
is how
did.
we talk about him.
Certainly did.
I don't think we've got confirmation from the UFC, but according to Makhachev, did you hear about this?
I didn't hear about this.
Makhachev claimed
tweeted
that
out.
no flags again. They took away flags.
We also have to understand that.
Right.
We also have to
Is that
understand
a
that.
region thing?
So somebody's feelings
know,
got hurt.
maybe.
Apparently, somebody's feelings got hurt.
Makhachev
if they're-
also says things sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, as I said,
So
we
we
haven't
don't
got confirmation from the UFC, but Makhachev did put it out there that they are taking flags away.
We'll
So-
see tomorrow night. So something to keep an eye on. Something to keep an eye on at fight night for sure.
My immediate reaction is A, I wonder if this is actually true, because I would be surprised if it is. But then B, if it is, that feels like that's probably an Israel-Palestine Arab region thing generally, trying to prevent something, right?
That would make a lot of sense. Yes, given that. Yeah.
But also,
of course.
But also, I doubt that this is true. But I don't know.
What was up with all the? Did we get an answer? What was up with all the booing about India at the press conference?
I think did
I misinterpret that, or is it?
I heard Dana was confused as well, and I think it's because there was. I don't know if there were some fans from Pakistan who said they wanted a card in Pakistan, maybe that's what it was. It was just we want it in our country, not in India. Something like that. No, I don't think it was anything like offensive. I assume it wasn't anything political or racial. Just like, hey, what about us? We want a card first. I think that's what. I'm pretty sure that's what it was.
All right.
Dana was very confused. Dana was like, what the what? Why is there booing happening? Yeah, so I don't know.
All right, one last question.
What do we got? Do we suspect win or lose that Kamaru will stay in middleweight?
Dude, I don't know what Kamaru does if he loses. This is a very unexpected second chapter for him, post-prime chapter for him that I think none of us saw coming. I genuinely have no idea what happens if he loses.
Yeah, according to I think Mark Raimondi, he was the fourth option or something. So
yeah, dude, that I'm telling you, that 24-hour. Go listen to that heck of a morning when we talked about the fight week chaos, where I could actually tell that story, because everything Mark wrote, was real. It's all legit. It was crazy, and it all started with a random phone call I got from somebody who never calls me unless it's something bad happened or something crazy happened, because it's always text. But if I see that person's phone number, oh, something's up. Something's up. Yeah. Maybe. Why? So I talked to Chris Weidman, because we did the swing rounds, which is you're going to see a little piece of a preview of what that's going to look like in the future. We're going to start putting it together next week. But Weidman doesn't believe he's going to stick around at 85 very long. I know Bo Nichols talked about that. He doesn't think he's going to stick around very long either. So
this is a paycheck.
That's a great question. This is a great question. But he also has the most to gain out of maybe anybody on this card.
It's
easily.
Career-wise, is just so smart. Like the house money, we hear that term a lot. I think he's the true fighter playing of house money on this card.
Yep.
Outside of the actual physical violence.
1,000%.
Yeah.
It doesn't hurt his legacy. He's God knows how many fights away from ever fighting for the welterweight title again. Unless Colby beats Leon, then that maybe sets up a shot. But if Leon wins, he's so far away from another welterweight title shot. There's what was the motivation for getting back in there and grinding his way to another shot? Sorry to go to this question. It's really more if he loses. If he wins, of course he's going to stay at 185. He's going to go for a title shot. How long he would stay after that, I don't know. Let's say best case scenario for him, he wins, beats Sean Strickland. Is he sticking around to defend the middleweight title? 3 or 4 times.
He has the belt. We're just.
I'm just saying.
Really
I'm going.
Yeah.
I literally said best case scenario if that happened. I don't know if he sticks. He probably pulls the GSP, right? He probably wins the title and says, "I'm going out on top. I'm done. I don't want to. I am a smaller, welterweight. Maybe I could beat some of these guys at 185, but it's a lot to ask. He'll be 37 years old probably by the time he even gets a shot at Strickland. It'd be a great way to go out as a 2-division champion. So I think the better question is, does he stick around for a long at 185? But I think if he sticks around at 185, it won't be for long. But of course, if he wins, he's going to stick around. He's going to get that title shot.
I just can't stop thinking about that potential legacy shift that Kamaru would undergo. Like something that none of us actually thought would be possible, of just perfect timing, right place, right time, right opposition, right middleweight champion, the guy he's already beaten. Like, can you imagine if Kamaru over the next 8 months does like this weird Michael Bisping thing where he gets this late chapter that none of us thought and goes down as a 2-division champ? That completely changes the way we talk about him from a historical perspective.
Is he favored? Is he favored against Strickland? Usman?
I don't know.
It would depend on what the Chimaev performance looks like.
Probably not.
Sure.
Yeah.
If he goes out there and starches Khamzat, I think he would probably be fair.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not picking Usman, but also Chimaev is not proven at middleweight. He's not proven at all at middleweight.
He's not proven at really any weight. Like the Gilbert Burns thing, you can give him, but outside of that,
we'll give him.
Outside,
But Kamaru's beating Gilbert too, you know? Like,
more decisively.
More emphatically.
Yeah. That's to me, it's super interesting. All right. That's it.
All right.
I'm excited.
Hey,
I'm so excited for this card. Can I say I am super excited? Yeah.
Yes. More questions tomorrow morning with Jed and Lucy. Maybe AK will tag in too. Who the hell knows? People's Pre-Fight Show, 9:15 a.m. Eastern time, right around that area.
6:15 a.m. my time. Yeah. Jeez. Jerks.
Watch party, 1:45 p.m. Eastern, 10:45 a.m. Pacific. Super excited. It's like the 1-year anniversary of the watch party. Started at UFC 280 in Abu Dhabi last year, and now we're back at it again. And then all sorts of fun stuff. Jose in Abu Dhabi, all the winners, the post-fight press conference as well, winner interviews along the way, post-fight show. We're going to do a little live reaction on the MMA Fighting TikTok after the event ends. So stay tuned for that. And then AK and I will be back on Sunday for a live edition of On to the Next One to do some matchmaking. So thank you all very much. For Casey, for Shaheen, for AK, I am Mike Heck. Get some sleep, everybody. Get your coffee ready, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Let's go D-backs. Back in this, baby.
Go Stros!